Welcome to The Explainer. All right, let's just dive straight into this. You know, when we think about the music industry, our minds immediately go to the flashing lights, the glamorous lifestyle, and of course, those massive, life-changing million-dollar record deals. I mean, it looks like the ultimate dream, right? But what if I told you that for a lot of artists, that glittering surface is actually hiding a pretty brutal financial reality? Today, we're going to unpack the gritty math and the incredibly strict contracts of the music business. We are pulling back the curtain on the illusion of the million-dollar record deal.
So here's the million-dollar question. Literally, how does a global pop star go broke? It sounds completely absurd, doesn't it? You've got an artist with a smash hit song playing on absolutely every radio station, millions of streams, sold-out arenas, and yet they end up filing for bankruptcy. How is that even mathematically possible? Well, to answer that, we really have to look past the fame and dig straight into the accounting.
And this paradox was just brilliantly illustrated back at the 1996 Grammy Awards. The iconic R&B group TLC literally stood on stage, holding their trophies, having sold millions of records, and announced to the entire world that they were broke. It was this shocking moment of total transparency, and it immediately humanizes the complex, kind of abstract accounting we're about to explore. Section 1. The million-dollar illusion.
Okay, so the absolute biggest myth in entertainment really comes down to one single word: the advance. Listen, an advance is not a signing bonus. Let me repeat that, not a bonus. It's a prepayment against future royalties that you haven't even earned yet. It is a recoupable debt. Think of it like getting your salary for the next few years paid on day one. Sure, it feels like free money at first, but the label recovers every penny of that money from your share of the royalties before you ever see another dime.
Let's actually look at how fast that money vanishes. Rock star Courtney Love famously broke this down for us. Imagine a four-piece band gets a massive $1 million advance. Wow, right? Well, half of it, 500 grand, goes straight to recording costs. The manager takes 20% of what's left, so that's 100K. Lawyers and business managers take 50K. Taxes eat up another 170K, so what's left? Just $180,000 for the four band members to split. That comes out to exactly $45,000 per person to live on for an entire year while they make the record. All of a sudden, that $1 million looks a whole lot like an average middle-class salary.
Section 2. How recoupment traps artists.
The absolutely crucial thing to understand here is recoupment. This is the dynamic accounting process where a label recovers its expenses by basically keeping the artist's future earnings. But here is the kicker. It is not just the advance. The label adds almost every single cost: the music videos, the independent radio promotion, the tour support, straight onto the artist's debt pile. The label spends the cash, but the artist owes it back out of their own royalty share.
To see how this builds up, let's use this really brilliant analogy from music industry educator Mark Tavern. Imagine the artist's debt as a bucket. Every time the label spends money on marketing or recording, that bucket gets bigger. Now imagine a faucet over that bucket, dripping the artist's royalty share in. And keep in mind, that share is typically only 12 to 20% of sales. So those pennies are just dripping into this massive bucket. The artist only gets a paycheck if that bucket completely fills up and overflows.
Let's actually put Courtney Love's math to the test here. Say that album is a massive hit. It sells 1 million copies and grosses $11 million. Incredible. But after all the manufacturing, the marketing, and those advance costs are deducted from the artist's tiny royalty share, the band's bucket still hasn't overflowed. The label walks away with a cool $6.6 million profit, and the band's profit is exactly zero. They generated $11 million of value, and as Love pointed out, they might as well be working at a convenience store.
Section 3. Cross-Collateralization explained.
Now we get to cross-collateralization. This is a contractual clause that allows a label to use royalties from any hit record to pay back the costs of any flop. Going back to our bucket metaphor, imagine connecting multiple buckets with a pipe. If your first album flops, well, that bucket is empty. If your second album is a massive smash hit, the label just pipes the royalties from the hit album into the empty bucket of the flop album until both are full. Your debt just carries forward indefinitely.
To really wrap your head around the sheer scale of this debt, just look at this number: $800,000. That is the staggering amount that rapper Kreayshawn stated she still owed Sony in 2020. That was nearly a decade after her viral smash hit single, Gucci Gucci. Because of the super high costs of her debut album, the massive streaming numbers from her hit single were literally just pouring into an unrecouped bucket. And this resulted in a truly wild scenario. Kreayshawn actually took to social media to beg her fans not to stream or buy her major label music. I mean, it's a shocking irony, right? A creative artist begging fans to stop consuming her art simply because every single penny generated went straight back into the label's pocket to pay down her unrecouped balance. It left her with absolutely nothing.
Section 4. When contracts become servitude.
Take the legendary artist Prince, who famously rebelled against his label, Warner Bros. He once said, "Record contracts are just like, I'm going to say the word, slavery. I would tell any young artist, don't sign." Prince felt so trapped by his contract, so utterly unable to control his own output or his master recordings, that he actually changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol. He even performed with the word slave written across his face just to protest his complete lack of autonomy.
And you can see just how extreme this legal control can get when you look at the timeline of the Britney Spears conservatorship. Under the guise of legal protection, this arrangement functioned as literal servitude. For 13 years, Britney was deemed legally incapable of managing her own life, yet simultaneously, she was forced into grueling performance schedules, like a massive Las Vegas residency, generating millions and millions of dollars for the very people controlling her every move.
Trust is also weaponized all the time in this industry. Look at manager Lou Pearlman's exploitation of massive boy bands like NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. He heavily abused information asymmetry by secretly naming himself the sixth member of the band, which allowed him to siphon off a sixth of all their profits. After the bands grossed $10 million touring, he handed out wildly disappointing checks for just $10,000 to each exhausted member.
Let's actually circle back to TLC for a second. 2%. That is the tiny, fractional slice TLC received of the $175 million generated by their CD sales. That is an astonishing gap between the actual value the artist created and the compensation they walked away with. And it explains exactly why the biggest group in the entire world had to file for bankruptcy just to try and escape their contract.
The crucial takeaway here is summed up perfectly, once again, by Courtney Love. The band owns none of its work. They can pay the mortgage forever, but they'll never own the house. She compares the traditional recording contract to sharecropping, because unlike authors who retain the copyright to their books and simply license them out to publishers, recording artists have historically signed away the permanent ownership of their master recordings in exchange for that initial advance.
Section 5. The Rebellion, and how artists fight back. The good news? Today, artists are utilizing some incredibly powerful legal and strategic weapons to break free. They're invoking the 35-year copyright reversion rule to claw back their masters. Bands like Incubus used California's law that limits personal service contracts to 7 years to essentially force renegotiations. And honestly, today, a lot of artists are just skipping the major labels entirely, using independent distribution to release their music directly to their fans. This all translates into a totally new business model. We are finally moving away from the old way, taking a massive advance but losing your copyrights and getting trapped in an unrecouped debt cycle. Now we're looking at the new way, accepting a smaller advance or even no advance at all, retaining your copyrights and negotiating a true 50-50 profit split. Trading those upfront advance dollars for long-term ownership is very often the absolute smartest financial move an artist can make.
Which leads us to the ultimate takeaway for literally any creative entering the entertainment industry today. Keep the copyright, license the product. Don't sell the house just to get an upfront check to pay the mortgage. Ownership of your intellectual property is infinitely more valuable than the shiny illusion of the $1 million signing bonus.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. The next time you stream a hit song, I want you to ask yourself, who are you actually paying? Is your fractional penny going into the pocket of the artist whose voice is in your ears? Or is it just dripping into a massive, unrecouped bucket owned by a multinational corporation? It kind of completely shifts how you view the music you consume every single day, doesn't it? Thanks so much for joining me to unpack this one, and I'll see you on the next Explainer.